game's called Tungulus.
There's a fridge door in the doorway.
Okay, we got spooky, hello?
That's where they keep the Tungulus!
Are we gonna go... Okay, I'm just gonna... Okay.
Can someone check for me if the person who made this made a bunch of other games? Because this is looking very familiar.
You are possessed by madness. In another way, could not be.
Tungulus.
That was fucking awesome.
Back in earlier YouTube days, all the popular channels played horror games. Part of the appeal was watching your favorite YouTuber be scared and yell at the camera for dramatic effect. After quite some kick-started careers, the demand finally outweighed the supply. From that point on, more and more YouTubers scraped the barrel for more scary games to play and react to. It was at this point that a lot of YouTubers found something more impactful than playing good horror games, playing bad horror games. To this day, there are people explicitly looking for and consuming content that contains bad horror games. Me included. The inherent irony feels to me like a very basic version of a joke. The build-up being the attempt at being scary, and the punchline being any kind of glitch or translation error. This story started in October 2017 when I was watching a video by the Game Grumps. The Game Grumps are two Let's Players playing a variety of games and talking over them in a very funny and personal way. They inspired this video. Every year, the Game Grumps play scary games for Halloween. In 2017, they played a game called Tungulus. They quickly noticed that the game was not scary. It was actually of rather poor quality. It was perfect content for bad horror enthusiasts like me. Since that day, Tungulus never really left my mind. I kept thinking about it every month, at least once. It had a weird kind of appeal to me. In 2022, I decided to finally give in to the itch and buy the game on Steam and play it myself. It was at this point I realized it was gone. The game was nowhere to be found. All that was left was a community tab on Steam and some confused fans. No one seemed to know where it went. Just some rumors and nothing concrete. Easy, I thought. I'll just reach out to the dev and ask them for what happened. When you watch the Game Grumps video, you can actually see the dev's name in the opening. So I thought I might just look up the dev and ask. But while I was rechecking on the Internet Archive, I found something curious. The publisher of Tungulus was marked as a company named QuiQuoPro Games. Who was that? And why were they not visible at all in the Game Grumps video? I decided to check up on them and realized something rather strange. They had multiple games on Steam. 13. No. 20. No. 21 games. Why the uncertainty? Well, Googling their name yielded unclear results. Only by doing some digging I found a list I deemed complete as of writing this. But who knows? Maybe there are more out there. Why is that weird? Well, where are those games? Actually, where's the entire company? I found none of their games on Steam. Neither did I find an actual account for the company. All I found was a community page with 2 members. The administrator was called Danny Studio. What I could find were entries on Steam Tracker that claimed the games to be banned, like in this example with Tungulus. So the games were all gone. Weird. But some indie games vanishing did not seem like an issue to me at the time. So I continued my research on Tungulus. It was removed from the Steam store on November 30th, 2020. The websites that track Steam data are sometimes a little inaccurate, so I will base my data in this video on SteamDB to prevent having multiple sources with slightly different data. The date seemed familiar to me. Where did I see this date before? Oh yeah! On every other game published by QuiQuoPro. They all were removed on November 30th, 2020. Okay, so that's weird. They were all removed at the exact same time. In this video, I'm going to talk about my findings regarding QuiQuoPro Games and give some context on what I think happened to them. This is What Happened to QuiQuoPro, the keeper of Tungulus. Let me start by stating the primary objective of my research. I want to find out what happened to Tungulus and why it was removed from the Steam store. To do so, I tried to find out what happened to its last owner, its publisher, QuiQuoPro Games. I, in no way or form, want to tarnish anyone's name or game with this video. Please, don't harass anyone I mention in this video, and please, don't try to reach out to them. I don't condone that kind of behavior at all, and don't want to have anything to do with it. Now, let's start my weird obsession by listing the games that were related to QuiQuoPro Games in chronological order. I knew I needed a way to contact QuiQuoPro Games, but I could not find anything. No contact information, no phone number, no email address, nothing. So I started to reach out to the developers of the games that weren't directly made by them. They interacted with QuiQuoPro Games clearly, so they must have something for me. At the beginning I thought I might only have to reach out to a single dev, get the email address or whatever, establish communications with QuiQuoPro Games, and then do a write-up of my wacky little adventure. The first developer I successfully reached out to was the creator of QuiQuoPro, Zuakate Games. I tried to find an email address first, but that is sadly not how search engines work. I found their Facebook, Twitter and Instagram accounts. They were all dead since 2020, so no way I would get in contact for that. Linked on their Facebook page was a website, zuakategames.cl. That is Chile's top-level domain. A hint, just not a very useful one. I also found their YouTube channel, which had an amazing trailer for QuiQuoPro.
Cerdo córneo, cerdo córneo, cerdo córneo, cerdo córneo. Párate para deleitarte con una historia tan épica como la de aquel fontanero en la friendzone. ¿Tú peleando con tu madre? Distintos power-ups que tienes a tu disposición. Morir, morir, morir y morir. Ah.
And apparently they also made a podcast. However, the YouTube channel has also been dead since 2020. I did find the itch.io account though, where I left a comment in the hope of them getting back to me. I had little hope. The account was also inactive for quite some years at that point. But then, I got an email in my inbox. They actually answered me and were really stoked to talk to me about their game. This surprised me, since I'm a nobody. I then started to write down some questions. I mainly wanted to gather some information about QuiQuoPro Games, but the game enthusiast in me couldn't waste an opportunity to ask them about their game too. They were a small Chile-based group that wanted to make a shoot-'em-up game. One of the developers wanted to make a cute pony game in a non-traditional way. I really enjoyed talking to them, but I nearly forgot the important question. What happened to QuiQuoPro Games? So I asked them the following, assuming that QuiQuoPro was working very tightly with them. In November 2020, your publisher QuiQuoPro Games left Steam. What happened? The answer surprised me.
First of all, and to be clear, QuiQuoPro are no publishers of us. A member of them contacted us in regards to buying QuiQuoPro's distribution on Steam with a fixed amount of money, and that was all the contact with them. Then we learned about them being taken out of Steam with the games, which was quite surprising.
I could not believe what I just read. QuiQuoPro was not affiliated with them. They just outright bought the distribution rights. Why is that so surprising? Well, this is not too common practice in game development. Normally a publisher takes a cut from game sales in exchange for support in development or advertisement. But QuiQuoPro was already being sold on Steam when the deal was being made. Assuming you advertise your game and have some wishlists on Steam, a game normally sells the most copies in the first 2 weeks and loses sales week after week afterwards. There are exceptions, of course. Some games only really take off after months, when they are found by an influencer or the like. But normally, games sell best in the first weeks and then decline slowly. So buying the distribution rights for a game after these 2 weeks is weird to say the least. They already missed a big chunk of income. But that is not quite what QuiQuoPro Games did. They did not buy it 2 weeks after release, or even within the same month, not even the same year. The earliest date I can find shows that they waited 3 years. The game was already forgotten by the Steam algorithm, gone, reduced to atoms. And QuiQuoPro Games bought the distribution rights for it? At this point, I knew there was more to this. Either a weird business model I didn't fully understand, like having insane marketing or better alternative markets, or something else. I asked Zuakate Games if they had any way to contact QuiQuoPro Games. They did not. The game was released in 2016. The deal must have been in 2019. I asked them in 2022. I had waited for too long, but that wouldn't stop me. Someone had to know something, so I tried to talk to someone else. The next dev I successfully reached out to was Second Dimension, the creators of MangamEngine. I bet you think finding them was as convoluted as Zuakate Games. But no, they have an active website and Discord where they share a program called Second Basic, which is a tool used to create games for the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive. Really cool stuff actually. They even sell the boards needed to play a game on an actual device. So finding them was easy. They responded fast and were incredibly nice to me. I asked them a bit about the game, and what I expected was actually true. The game was a copyleft clone of Fix-It Felix Jr. from the movie Wreck-It Ralph. And apparently, they sold enough units to offset the production costs, which is rare in indie game development. But enough about that. What did they know about QuiQuoPro Games? Asked them for any information. They responded.
Aside from selling them the license to sell Get 'em Gary as a single game on Steam, I know nothing about them. After the licensing happened, I haven't heard from them since.
This story felt familiar. It sounded just like the experience of Zuakate Games. Someone reaching out and asking to buy the distribution rights, and then breaking off contact on success. The earliest entry in the Wayback Machine that shows QuiQuoPro as the publisher is from November 2020. Get 'em Gary was released in 2017. Again, QuiQuoPro Games waited for 3 years before buying the rights to a game. My best bet at this point would have been that QuiQuoPro was bundling and reselling games. But I found no data confirming that. I knew something was off, but not what. So I started to compare Calicornio and Get 'em Gary to one another. At first nothing seemed off, but then I looked at the sales graphs and compared that to the player counts, and see for yourself. This is not how a graph should look like. These are very unnatural spikes. These games have increased over 30,000% in their player count on multiple occasions. This does not normally happen. Sometimes games are played by influencers and have insane spikes in popularity as a result. Often people leave equally fast, since it was just a hyped up idea and there was close to no substance in the game. But I'd never before heard about Calicornio or Get 'em Gary. I also couldn't find any large influencers talking about them either, especially not on multiple occasions. I had to go deeper and find another source, since Second Dimension also had no contact information to QuiQuoPro Games. So I tried to reach out to Geeksloth, the creators of Samudai. A simple Google search yielded their Facebook page, which was not used since April 2016. Their website was also dead. Besides some blogs, that was nearly all I could find. Was this my first dead end? The stalk on me couldn't stop there though. The blog posts were made by a person with the screen name Anthorn. I found their itch.io, social media and Ko-fi accounts. I reached out and got a pleasant interview from them. In this interview I tried to get 2 pieces of information. 1. Since I had data on Samudai from SteamDB, I could check with the dev who had actual access to the correct data if my data was reasonably close. 2. I still needed a way to contact QuiQuoPro Games.
I started to look into the company, which is QuiQuoPro Games, which also published Samudai from Geeksloft later. I then made a list of all the games they made, and I'm currently looking at what happened to the devs as sort of where they now story, you know?
I see. Yeah, I'm not too sure. I thought we didn't have a publisher, but
So I found some data about the sales of your game. Apparently, it made $490 in revenue.
on Steam?
Yes.
No, that's not correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Like, this data is very imprecise. I already figured that. Like, it had to be way more, right?
I have my own game on Steam for my own company, and when I log into the Steam backend, I can also still log into the Geeksloft backend, so I can actually see the sales. And I saw it's more than what you said. But after I left the team, I didn't get any money of the sales that we got after I left. So but I did see that there was a little bit of an increase, and that might be because they sold the game to a publisher.
This was helpful. Now I knew SteamDB was most likely undershooting, which was crazy to think about. I also asked them about their current endeavors, and I really want to give them a shout out at this point. I'll link all developers in the description, but I feel that Anton deserves a special shout out at this point. Please, have a look at the game Spirits 50X. It's just like air hockey, but better and actually nice to look at. Anyway, let's continue our journey to the fourth developer I reached out to. The studio's name was Screeching Wizard. They made the game Organ Biker. Finding them was rather simple. They had a Kickstarter campaign in 2015. I found a business email on there and reached out. I asked them if they were approached the same way as the other developers. They said yes, and added this.
They had already missed the boat on sales as the game had been listed for months.
It wasn't just me who noticed. Buying a game that has already been out for months is weird, especially since QuiQuoPro Games did not seem to change a lot about the games, but simply kept them on the Steam store. I could not find any new advertisements or the like. Looking at the price history of the 4 games shows that they have been on sale aggressively since QuiQuoPro Games bought their distribution rights. SteamDB seems to have removed some data, so that's all I can show you without using another source. While looking for answers, I found a Reddit thread. It was talking about weird sales data on Steam. There were 2 games on the list that I knew were distributed by QuiQuoPro Games: Corneo and Across the Moment. The OP did not really get an answer, but they opened up my eyes to a possibility I hadn't thought about yet. Steam trading cards farming. Let's start with a short explanation of what I mean when I say Steam trading cards farming. Steam allows its users to collect trading cards when playing games. These cards can then either be collected or sold on the Steam market. Owning a lot of cards increases your Steam level for bragging rights. Selling them makes you a little bit of money. Since the virtual number with bragging rights is part of this, it was to be expected that a lot of games were released on Steam to specifically farm trading cards. But there have also been a lot of users that simply farm trading cards using bots to then sell the cards on the store to make some profit. If QuiQuoPro was buying these games to then give them to some bot farm to make some money, that would explain the very low sales and the very high player peaks I found. The creator of a game can create a bunch of keys, thousands even. These are meant to be used for giveaways or sales on other platforms. This would allow QuiQuoPro Games to give them away very easily. However, I had no evidence of that, so I had to continue my search. So I felt like it was time. I reached out to MangamEngine, the developer of Tungulus. So far, I tried to find a way to contact QuiQuoPro Games to figure out what happened to the game. However, I figured it would be way faster to directly ask the developer. Something I probably should have done at the beginning. They were pretty hard to find. The only way I saw to contact them was on Steam. The Steam profile was still available, so I sent a friend request. Before I continue, please let me repeat, I don't want anyone to reach out to them, especially on my behalf. Leave them alone. They were all really nice to talk to me and they deserve privacy. MangamEngine was very direct with their words, and I don't blame them. I reached out to ask them about a game that was already out for 5 years and banned for 2. I will spare you the details and get to the good stuff. I first asked if they were the correct person, since I wanted to avoid spamming someone with a similar name, and they said they were, but didn't care about the game. I then asked if they would at least give me some insights while the game was removed from Steam, since they seemed disinterested to talk to me. Their answer was...
There's only one answer. Unprofitable.
There it was, the answer we've all been waiting for. Thanks for watching. Unprofitable? They removed the game since it was unprofitable. They removed something that cost them nothing in upkeep because it did not actively make them money? I believe that this is part of a language barrier. What I believe they meant is that they sold the rights to the game since they did not make enough money with it. Releasing a game on Steam costs money, but keeping it up costs nothing. You still have the chance of someone finding it, buying it. There's nearly no good reason to take a game down once it is released when it gets to profitability. It just doesn't make sense. At this point I was kinda bummed out. I got no more answers from them. For some reason they never blocked me though. That was the developer of Tungulus, the game I loved since I first saw it. I actually like these kinds of games. It fills me with so much joy to just watch or play them. Bad horror games rock. But I got nothing from MangamEngine. No contact data, no answers, not even a new lead. All I had left at this point was one more creator, CapeOfGames LLC. They were the ones that made The Divine Paradox. I found them on the weirdest side of the internet, which I won't show here for obvious reasons. We talked a bit, and they told me basically the same thing the other devs did too. They were contacted and asked for the distribution rights for a flat fee. But they also said that they had never heard of QuiQuoPro Games, which was strange. The other developers knew about them, but this one told me they were contacted by some person and never were told about QuiQuoPro Games at all. I started asking myself why they would not know, until I realized the most important fact about all the devs I talked to. They were all indie developers with need for money. They all released games that were either financial losses or barely broke even. At first I thought that might have been a coincidence, but in this case it made sense. Who would be the kind of person to sell the distribution rights to their game to a random stranger? People in dire need of money. Indie development is very expensive, and development teams normally cost a small fortune to uphold. If the game barely breaks even, they have no reason to not take an offer like that. You don't find people or games like this by accident. This seemed systematic to me, but I needed proof of that. So I continued a little more, even though all the remaining games were all directly made by QuiQuoPro Games. Or so I thought. But before I reveal that, let me talk about a Steam group I found. It is named Sturgeon's Law and was created by a Steam user with the name of ObeyTheFist. You might have heard of them. They're kinda notorious in the indie scene for leaving very long and a lot of times very negative reviews. They do a huge amount of reviews per week. Every week, for years now. They were active on one of the forums of one of the banned games. They answered a question about what happened to QuiQuoPro Games and said that,
according to random news on the internet, they got banned for handing Steam keys off to Russian bots.
if that ain't a lead, I don't know what is. So I joined the Steam group and posted my questions. I had to wait 3 months, but then they got back to me. They also immediately shared a link. I was stoked. Was there actual evidence-based data out there that no one else had read about before? So I clicked on the link. It did not work. And even worse, all archived versions on the Internet Archive did not display correctly either. For just a second, I felt a shiver run down my spine. Was I being watched? Was the site taken down to prevent me from finding the truth? Was I already too deep? But then I checked in later, and apparently the maintainer of the website just accidentally downed the entire website themselves. In the meantime, I was sent a cached version of the website and checked what new information I could gather from there. It was an article about a ban wave on Steam. It contained a list of games of QuiQuoPro Games that were banned. According to their website, QuiQuoPro Games was banned due to mass spotting for trading cards. And I had reason to believe this was true. However, the site listed no sources. So I took note of that sentiment, but did not actually believe it yet. Then a thought crossed my mind. What if the other games were not made by QuiQuoPro Games? I just looked for games that had their developers set as anything but QuiQuoPro Games, since I thought they were a publisher. But what if the other ones were also not made by them? A bit late for that thought, but better late than never. So I looked it up and, indeed, I found 13 other studios to reach out to. QuiQuoPro Games fully removed the developers' names from the games. They told me the usual. They released the game, it was doing bad or okay, a random guy on Steam reached out, offered some money for the distribution rights, and vanished. Weirdly enough, the people were offered vastly different amounts of money. Some were getting half what others got. One of them shared a personal opinion, which I feel I should share at this point.
I have left game development about 3 years ago. There's not much money in it, to be honest. And someday you'll receive an email asking to buy the rights of your games. And I believe many developers will happily sell their rights because their games never made the money.
I feel like this really hammered it in my head. That these people were all struggling in their own way. They all wanted to live their dreams and sell a game people could enjoy. Or just make some money, nothing wrong with that. But indie development is hard, and the market is ruthless and oversaturated. Selling your game for some profit and moving on might just be the best way for a lot of people. But none of them could actually give me any connection. I was not even surprised at this point. It seems like time did its part in making this a mystery. I was about to end my research here. I was just waiting for a single dev to get back to me, and then I would compile it all and end it right there. But then, I received a message in my inbox. It was a developer, but not the one I was waiting for. They had way more information than my other sources, but asked to remain anonymous. I chatted with them a bit, and they gave me some insights. I cannot share most of it, but it all combined to my next lead. The mysterious figure that reached out to the developers. The article I was referred to by ObeyTheFist listed a company called Netto Studio. They published 37 games, and from those, 24 were banned in November 2020. I looked at the numbers and... well, what do we have here? Who owns Netto Studio? And why is that important? Bear with me for a second. The owner is a Steam user named Gourmet K. I recognized their username. I saw it multiple times while researching the developers related to QuiQuoPro Games. They were in some of their friends lists. I initially didn't think anything of it, since indie developers often frequent the same forums on Steam, but now it seemed like this was not by coincidence. I searched for Netto Studio on Google and found their owner's LinkedIn account. Actually, I found two. Which one was theirs? I believe they're both owned by the same person. The first one I found had the companies listed, Netto Studio and Volands Nolands Games. So that one was pretty likely owned by them. The second one had a rather unique profile picture, which I could find on the YouTube channel of Netto Studio, owned by Gourmet K, who I previously assumed to own the first LinkedIn account. Next, I wanted to do some background checks on multiple Steam accounts that were somehow linked to Gourmet K. To ensure I did not miss anything, I found that the Steam account Danny Studio was formerly called, which, according to LinkedIn, was also Gourmet K's real name. Now I had reason to believe that Danny Studio, the most likely owner of QuiQuoPro Games, and Gourmet K, the owner of Netto Studio, were the same person. They left their YouTube account open for business emails. There it was, my window of opportunity. I had reason to suspect that QuiQuoPro Games had botted their games. A most likely related owner of a company with similar player engagement, and an email address to reach out to them. I wrote up a 2-page questionnaire and sent it to them. I gave them a deadline of 4 weeks in the future, enough for them to see it and decide whether to answer or not. Of course there was a chance that they wouldn't see it, but it was the best bet I had, so went for it.
4 to 6 weeks later.
Gourmet K did not respond to my questions. Where does this leave us? Well, we can only summarize what we have and go from there. Most games of QuiQuoPro Games show unnatural player engagement. The games were bought for little money from developers that needed income, fast. QuiQuoPro Games did not seem to do anything to make the games more monetizable. The company and all their games were banned from Steam, so some kind of wrongdoing is likely to have occurred. Multiple developers told me that they suspect botting as well. The person that owned QuiQuoPro Games is likely the same person that owns other companies with similar strange player engagement. These points seem to paint an obvious picture, so why do I not confirm it after all this work I did? Simple, I don't know for sure. I found no hard evidence, nothing I could point to and guarantee it to be real. However, now that I've collected and summarized all this data, I hope that there are people out there that will see this video and maybe think to themselves, I could add to this, I know an important factoid, and help me to finally figure out what happened to QuiQuoPro, the keeper of Tungulus. If you watched until now, thanks a lot. I could not believe that this would take up so much of my time. I was on and off on this research project due to having a full-time job, but you can rest assured that it took a lot of my spare time from 2022 to 2024. I really appreciate you watching, and if you feel like I did a good job, leave a like, a comment, or you could even subscribe. If you find any errors, please comment them below as well. This was a lot of work, and I'm just a human, so something might have slipped through. Also, please take a look at the links I put in the description. Some of the developers are still active today, and I really want to thank them for being so nice to me by sharing their work. Please, be as nice to them as they were to me. Also, if anyone has a Steam key of Tungulus lying around, please let me know. I'm very interested in actually playing it.